You guys have some great questions.
We got to move on to questions. We have questions, and they are from people. The questions are brought to you by Travis Kelsey's brother, Jason, who will also be at the wedding. The questions are sponsored by Whistling Diesel's Get Out of Jail Fund. Questions are sponsored by the giraffe. They're tall, and they can eat stuff that other animals can't eat. What's that? Okay, questions are brought to you by Pilote or Kenan or Nick's YouTube channel.
Or the SL65 and all its torque.
You can ask us, yeah. The SL65 brings us the Earth's rotation.
Every single week, I'm really happy to get so many questions from you guys on the podcast, but we don't always have enough time to answer them. So in today's video, I wanted to pick some questions from the last couple of weeks and the last couple of podcasts that I could expand on a little bit more for you right now. So let's dig right into it. My girlfriend Emily asks, Kenan, after watching your new YouTube video, I decided to go through the rest of your YouTube channel and discovered that you have some real gems on there, which I've taken a lot of those down from a long time ago. But it has me, this guy asks, it has me thinking, can you tell us about the craziest cars you saw as young Kenan growing up in Ohio and attending St. Mary's Church? Certainly. I grew up in a small town called Hudson, Ohio. It's about halfway between Cleveland and Akron. And it's a relatively affluent area. And in the era that I lived there, there were always really cool cars around, especially like kind of in and around the recession era when I was young enough that I was into cars, but I could start to go ride my bicycle. My friend Ryan and I would go do some car spotting. We have this old YouTube channel called KRRS Hudson, it's our initials, where you go do some car spotting. But I saw some wild stuff. There was a Verde Ithaca Lamborghini Murcielago Roadster, and that Mercy was a pre-LP car, E-gear, very much like Nick's, but it was so cool. To see one in green with the frequency that we did was ridiculous. And of course, being in the Midwest, it really stood out. Turns out the car was actually owned by a guy who was writing false prescriptions to patients and got caught for it years later and ended up going to jail and had to sell the car, which is just like perfect. Of course, that's what somebody making money illegally would have bought at the time, a bright green Lamborghini. It was just too perfect, but the car was amazing. And I think it sold somewhere in Indiana last I checked, but it was a one-owner car. I bought it brand new from Midwestern Auto Group, and we used to see that all the time, and that was one of the crazier cars. There's also a Carrera GT in my hometown, Doug's exact spec. It was GT silver with the Ascot interior. That guy bought the car new in '05, and it was such a big deal. When this guy bought the car, it was actually published in our local newspaper, that this guy bought this crazy Porsche. He had to go to Georgia to learn how to drive it. It was a whole thing. And we used to see him getting cigarettes at like our local BP with the Carrera GT. It was just such a wild thing to see around, but that was a car I saw a lot. We had a 550 Barchetta in town, Spiker C8, La Violette. I mean, there were just lots of cool, crazy cars. Gallardo Superleggera, lots of Porsches. I remember green GT3 RS. A lot of these are actually owned by the same guy. Had quite a few cars in town. But nonetheless, you could pretty much go to our downtown area any Friday or Saturday night in the summertime and be guaranteed you're going to see something cool and interesting, whether it was a 456 or an F355. I've got a great picture of a 355 and a 360 together on the same stretch of road, just randomly. There were a lot of cool cars in my hometown, especially during that era. Things have changed a lot. You don't see those cars as much in Hudson anymore. I think some people either felt it was too gauche or those people just sort of moved away. The kids went through the school system and then they left because it's a very expensive town to live in, but it does have a great school system. That's why most people live there. But nonetheless, those are some of the craziest cars that I saw. I should do a video on it. I have great horrible pictures, but they look so correct and they're from that era. I should do a video going over it, but those are some of the highlights that I remember seeing. Quasi Brad asks, Kenan, obviously the SL65 was the right choice. Thank you, I tend to agree. But what happened to the buy a Cayenne Turbo resolution you made alongside your $2,000 on the E39 resolution? Why did you change your mind? Great question. Actually, Doug gets all of the credit for this one. I really wanted to buy a Cayenne Turbo, a 9.2A generation Cayenne Turbo, because Doug used one in our adventure series and it was such a great car. I just fell in love with it. It kind of does everything. It's fast, it's comfortable, you can drive over the crappy San Diego roads that we have with ease. It's just a really good car and they're relatively robust. The early cars had some issues with I think it's the VarioCam system. There's some bolts in there that they had problems with. There's a recall that's been rectified, and of course the transfer case is something that can go wrong with those. They have their foibles, but in general, they're pretty reliable cars. The reason I decided against it is that I don't have any children right now. I don't really have a lot of responsibilities. I can afford to be a little bit impractical with my automotive decisions. And Doug actually encouraged me to think along that line. So it makes sense in this stage of my life to have a two-seater sports car and kind of do that a little bit more as opposed to having a family car. At some point in my life, it will be much harder to justify having the sports cars, and I will need something like a Cayenne Turbo. But for now, I might as well have fun with the fun stuff. And so that is what kind of guided me into considering a Viper or the SL65 or some of these two-seater sports cars that I've always wanted. Now is the right time. And so it was just time to jump in. So I don't know if I blame Doug or he gets credit for that, but I'm giving him his kudos on that one. He encouraged me to think bigger. And so that's why I kind of let the Cayenne resolution go, but I have stuck hard to my $2,000 on the E39 resolution. Cars of Glasgow asks, Kenan, question for you. As a classic BMW enthusiast, you are probably aware of Zack Klapman from another podcast, The Smoking Tire, of course, huge fan of Zack. Like yourself, he is also a classic BMW enthusiast and owner. If you two were to meet and discuss BMW M cars, who would win in that discussion, E39 versus E46? I love Zack Klapman. I think he is one of the funniest people in the automotive space. All of his stuff always makes me laugh, and I have met him in person on a couple of occasions. He actually came down, we filmed some content with him for Cars and Bids, and I had a riot getting to talk to him. He's just so funny and fast and witty, and I really like him, and I love The Smoking Tires. I would say it is my favorite automotive podcast, and I listen to it religiously, and I think Matt Farah, I just have tremendous respect for the both of them. But we have talked about M cars, and they're very different. The E39 is just, it's great for highway use. I think Zack agrees with me on that. We love the V8, but his E46 is just better for the type of driving that he does, more of the canyon road stuff. That's what his E46 is best at. We both can agree they're ludicrously expensive cars to take care of. He's certainly been down that rabbit hole. I know his car hasn't been the easiest to own, but nonetheless, I think we both realize that they're just such good core enthusiast cars. And that's why, I mean, he's had his for a long time, and obviously I've had my M5 for 10 years now. So we both have those cars in our garage, and I don't see them going anywhere from either of our garages. They're just, BMW makes some great accessible enthusiast cars with exciting engines and fun chassis and a great community that surrounds them, and that's why they're both in our cars, so in our garages. So I wouldn't say that the E39 is better than the E46. They just do very different things, but there's a lot of crossover from the communities, and I guess that's kind of my way of answering that. I don't think we would determine that one is better than the other. I think we would determine certain situations in which one could be better than the other. But anytime I get to see Zack, it's always a treat. So I'd love to talk BMWs with him. Baxter8279 asks, Kenan, as someone who has invested thousands into the maintenance of your M5, what cars in your opinion are more reliable or less expensive to maintain than they get credit for? That is a great question. I think that the one that immediately comes to mind is the Aston Martin V8 Vantage. Those cars are actually very reliable. A lot of Aston Martins, rightfully so, are difficult cars to own. People know they're hard to own. The Vanquish comes to mind. I love the first gen Vanquish. I'd love to have a Vanquish S at some point in my life, but that's a notoriously hard car to own, and it deserves its reputation for being difficult, to be honest. But the V8 Vantage, the 4.3, and both the 4.3 and the 4.7, but they are both really good cars. Doug had his and drove it pretty much carefree. Actually, one of the reasons he got rid of it was it was a little bit too reliable. Not enough went wrong with it. He couldn't make content on that. And so ultimately, that car was just a good car. And the I've heard that reflected from a number of 4.3 owners and 4.7 owners alike. And when I say that, I'm referring to the engine displacement. They changed the displacement. That's considered the major facelift between the generations of V8 Vantage before they switched to the current generation Vantage. But I think those cars are really worth considering. They're pretty stout and fun cars, and they're relatively exotic, so it definitely belongs on that list. Another car on that list is the Audi R8. Those cars are actually quite stout cars. Yes, they share the engine, of course, with the RS4, and they do have some problems. The suspensions can be kind of difficult to live with. The engine does need, if you have the V8, it needs carbon cleaning. I don't know if the V10s are that way, but the V8 certainly is. The AC compressors can go bad in those cars, and although I think there's solutions now to kind of work around it, it used to be that you had to take the engine out to do that service. So they have some potential issues, but generally speaking, R8s are really solid cars. They can be used as pretty much daily drivers. And I actually tossed around the idea of potentially getting rid of the M5 and buying an R8 that we had in our office. Ultimately, I decided not to. I love my M5 and it was kind of just an academic exercise more than anything else. But they are pretty solid cars and they're very exotic and you can use them really easily. You can also have them serviced at your Audi dealer. Although there are some minor complications, as far as like ultra exotic cars go, which I think the R8 kind of classifies as a true exotic. I mean, they're pretty stout cars. That's an easy one to own. The third car that immediately comes to mind for me is the Ferrari 360. As exotic cars go, the 360 is not terrible in terms of maintenance. If you allot kind of the $2.5 to $3 grand a year for maintenance costs for that car, it'll treat you well. Our producer Sean has a 360 Modena, and that car has not given him an issue. I will say, because those cars got so inexpensive, there are a lot of bad examples out there that do need a lot of work to bring them up to snuff. But if you buy a decent one, everybody I've talked to who has owned a 360 has been very reliable for them. They can kind of use it like a normal car and use it with frequency, and a lot of people have not experienced being stranded by those cars. You know, the belt service is much easier because you can do it with the engine in situ. You don't have to take it out of the car. It's a much easier car to work on than its predecessor, and they're much less expensive than its successor, the F430. So the 360, I think, is less expensive to maintain than people realize, and it's a great place to start with Ferraris and exotic cars in general. So those are kind of my three cars like in the kind of exotic sphere that come to mind, just in general, that are just like less expensive to take care of than you might realize, and they're really fun. Mighty Mike asks, Kenan, congratulations on the SL65. Thank you very much. I'm curious to get your take on why the R230 doesn't get as much love in the SL community. To me, the R129 is what the 993 is to Porsche. It's the last of the analog era, beautiful design. But the R230 feels more like the Mercedes equivalent of the 996. More capable, more modern, but underappreciated. Personally, I think this reputation is undeserved, but I'd love to hear your perspective as an R230 owner. Great question, Mighty Mike. I feel the exact same way. I don't know why. I had always thought that the R230 would feel plasticky, or maybe it was like the 996 of the interior isn't as nice. And maybe that's the case with like the lower tier models, but with the 65, granted it is the most expensive, it's a wonderful place to be. I think that it developed a reputation for being difficult to own in terms of it got a lot more complicated compared to the R129. And I think that the cost of keeping it on the road is why it has that reputation. My next video is actually going to be on the R230's maintenance history, which I have a good thick binder on it, so stay tuned for that. I get into like how much that car actually costs to own. But I think that, styling-wise, yeah, the Bruno Sacker design for the R129 is just so beautiful. People tend to really gravitate towards that when it comes to the modern cars. And they are not very complicated, and they are incredibly reliable. But I agree, I think the R230 is phenomenal. I'm blown away at how much I like it. And I feel that its reputation, kind of not being beloved by the SL community is unjust. That said, I am biased as an owner, and I grew up during that era when that was the SL I thought of. But it's a great car. I think they're slept on, and that's reflected in the values of them. But nonetheless, I think that's a great thing for enthusiasts. It means we can always go out there and get one of those cars. They're all great cars. All the SLs are excellent. But yeah, I agree. More love for the R230, please. Super Duty 500 asks, question for Kenan and Filippo, who's not here. How is the ambiance in the office when Doug is filming? Do you have to be super quiet? What are your reactions when Doug is talking about cars? Good question. So yes, we are often in the office while Doug is filming. The studio is kind of all there together. If you watch the office tour that Doug and I did, things have changed a little bit in terms of the layout, but Doug is there filming, doing his thing, and going over the quirks and features of the cars. Yes, we do all have to be quiet. Nobody's allowed to talk in the office while he's doing that, just because you just don't want to be caught up by audio. You don't want to bother him either. So while he is filming, we do that, but then he kind of tells us when he's done, and then he films the B-roll, and we can all kind of talk again. He doesn't mind that. But it's fun. It's really fun when he brings the cars down. We poke around them a little bit ourselves. Especially when his process is he gets there, he kind of looks around the car, he finishes getting all of the quirks and features and kind of putting it together in his head about what he's going to say about those. He's done a lot of research. He does research in advance, but it's kind of just like formulating how he's going to do the video. And then you get to hear him record it and it all come together. And it's really cool. It's like, I feel lucky that I get to hear all of the videos before everybody sees them. And it's really fun to hear him go over the cars and then get to see them in person. And occasionally he'll call us over and we'll all be perplexed about how something works, or he thinks something is particularly quirky and he wants us to like see it in person. But it's really fun. It's a fun office to work in, and Doug always brings the most chaotic atmosphere to the office because he just is who he is. And so it's fun and enjoyable, and he's a riot. So that's what it's like in the office when Doug shows up to film the cars. A lot of fun, but definitely a measured chaos for sure. Frank AP asks, question for Ken and Doug mostly. You both say that you don't like modified cars, but you both own modified cars. You've also pined over lifted Porsches, engine swap BMWs, manual swap cars. Can you elaborate on your stance against modded cars? Absolutely. So number one thing is that I believe whatever your car is, you have a right to do with it whatever you want. I don't have to like it, other people don't have to like it, but you have to. So whatever you want to do to your car, express yourself, go wild. You just go out and enjoy it. That's the whole point of having a fun car. The reason I don't like modifications is I feel that they can do two things. One is that they can just negatively impact the experience. It makes the car, a lot of them, if you go for big power and like tons and tons of modifications, it can make the car just very unreliable. Sure, you make 1,500 horsepower, but your engine has real chance of catastrophic failure, or something's going to go wrong that's going to strand you. That is just very unattractive to me. I don't have the patience for that. And in addition to that, like my anxiety level would just be too high around the car. So anything that impacts reliability negatively, which a lot of like very big performance modifications do, it's just not for me. The second thing is that I feel that a lot of modifications take the car way away from what the manufacturer intended it to be. I like to experience cars as they were. And I know Doug feels the exact same way. That's why he seeks out unmodified cars for videos. We just want to know, like, what is the essence of the car actually like? How did the company intend for it to feel? And so from my perspective, modifications in a lot of ways can distract from that. And I don't want that. I want to experience the car as it was. So that's kind of why I don't love modifications. That, and the last thing is that when they impact the visual look of the car, like I don't like that. I like the press pictures of the cars. I like to see the cars, like, again, as they were intended. And when I see like a 355 on aftermarket wheels, it just kind of, it just doesn't look right in my mind. But again, that's just my opinion. You know, everybody can do whatever they like with their cars. The modifications I have are mostly for reliability or making the car more usable. Like the Bluetooth module I added to my M5. It's from Ted at Blue Bus. It plugs right into the CD changer. You don't have to cut any wires, but it gives me the ability to make phone calls and have Bluetooth audio streaming with my phone. It just makes the car a lot more usable. And so that's why I did that. And it really doesn't impact the way the car drives. It doesn't add any unreliability to the car. That's like a solid upgrade. And I know Doug loves doing those sort of similar modifications, like his heated seats that he added to the Carrera GT, or Bluetooth streaming to that car. Like, again, it just makes it so much more usable. So that's kind of why we're against modifications. Those are why we've done those specific modifications to our cars, and they're very heavily considered before we do so. So I hope that makes sense. Future former lawyer, that's a hilarious username. Kenan frequently refers to the E60 M5 as being difficult to own due to a number of well-known flaws, rod bearings, etc. Despite these flaws, will the 6-speed M5 is it undervalued for what it is? A V10 sports sedan with a 6-speed manual seems like a dream for many. I agree. I think the E60 M5 with a manual is a really special car that one day we'll look back on and will be much more appreciated. E60s are hard cars to own, but if you love it, I mean, there's nothing else like it. There just aren't, really, you name another V10 manual sedan that you can buy. You're at a pretty limited list. It was also just a time when BMW was insane. They were putting a 10-cylinder engine in the 5 Series. I mean, it's just crazy. And I think that those cars will develop a greater appreciation as time goes on. They're also not common. Most of the E60s, of course, were SMG. How will the values evolve? I don't really know. I think people just are afraid of taking care of that car, and rightfully so. That said, with a 6-speed, you remove one of the biggest problems that car has, and that's reliability related to the SMG system. So I don't know. I could see them becoming valuable cars down the line. I think they're really cool. And if you're thinking about one, I would highly encourage it. Just be ready for the maintenance and the horrific fuel consumption. All right, last question, again from Quasi Brad. Kenan, as someone who notoriously hates modifications, Are you going to keep the RennTech tune on the SL? I noticed in your video that you said the RennTech badges under the V12 Biturbo badges are coming off, but you didn't explicitly say anything about the tune. That is a great question. So as far as the tune goes, I was recently going through the service documentation, which again will be in an upcoming video. I did not find a receipt for the tune, so I don't know what tune the car has. I've been told that it has a tune, but I have no idea what it is. So in the end, I think what we're going to do, Nick and I are going to do a video where we do a dyno test between the cars. And I want to see if it's obvious that the car has a tune or if it doesn't. I think that there's a chance it doesn't have a tune, but I'm just not sure. It's so damn fast anyway. I'm not sure that it really matters. I certainly wouldn't go and hunt down more RennTech modifications to do to the car, but honestly, if it does have a tune, I'm gonna leave it exactly as it is. The car is performing really well. It seems to work. It also passes California smog with no issues, which is another thing that makes me think maybe it doesn't have a tune. So I would just probably leave it alone, to be honest with you. But I wouldn't pursue doing more modifications to it. I'm addicted to the power, so I don't want to change anything. Exactly as it is fine with me, and I really enjoy driving the car. So those are all of the questions that I wanted to answer. You guys asked a lot of great ones. There is still questions that I couldn't get to, but this video I think has gotten long enough. I would like to do this periodically. If you guys like asking questions and want me to answer them, I'm more than happy to do that. Feel free to comment down below and continue, of course, to watch this car pod and ask great questions there, as I will answer them there as well. Thank you all so much for watching. Happy Thanksgiving, and I'll talk to you very soon. Goodbye.